Ethan Cole was the superstar I had poured my heart and soul into creating. But when he won the Best Actor award, he accused me of coercing him into unethical deals and indirectly causing his mother's death. Overnight, I went from being a gold medal manager to a pariah, hated and despised by everyone. I ended up dying in a bathtub. When I opened my eyes again, I was back at the audition scene. This time, I chose Ryan Mitchell, whose looks and physique were far inferior to Ethan's. But Ethan, eyes red with emotion, said to me, "This time, I'll listen to you. Do you still want me?" "Get lost," I said coldly. "As far away as you can." Zoe, standing next to me, whispered in excitement, "Wow, that guy is so handsome. He could survive on his looks alone." The moment Ethan Cole stepped into the audition, his sharp features and tall, striking build caused a commotion. He was even more handsome than the most popular idols. "I just wonder if he has any real talent," someone muttered. A male contestant snorted sarcastically. "Guys like him are all pretty faces. No talent whatsoever. If he's so good looking, he should just go be an idol. What's he doing here at an actor's audition?" As expected, they were right. Other than his face, Ethan had nothing to offer. Even the simplest acting exercises left him frozen and awkward, like a wooden puppet. Two managers nearby shook their heads in disappointment, lamenting the waste of his good looks. But I let him pass. Under my strict training and meticulous management, Ethan made extraordinary progress. He rose from being an unknown rookie to the most promising actor, and finally won the Best Actor award at the Golden Summit Film Festival. None of that would have been possible without me. Without my efforts to pull strings, secure resources, and suppress negative press. Without me, he would have been nothing more than a pretty face, incapable of achieving his dreams. But in return, he betrayed me. When he accepted the Best Actor award, he tearfully revealed to the public that I had coerced him into compromising situations and even embezzled the money meant to treat his mother's illness, leading to her death. That night, his sobbing speech was, in my eyes, the best performance of his career. Yet it ruined me. The phone calls poured in that night, all asking why I hadn't killed myself yet. "You're a toad lusting after a swan," they spat. "You dared to manipulate Ethan Cole? Have you even looked at yourself in the mirror? Murderer, go die." In reality, his mother had never been sick. She was drowning in gambling debt. After Ethan became famous, she used illness as an excuse to extort money from him. I warned him repeatedly, but he refused to believe me. Finally, unable to watch him throw his earnings into a bottomless pit, I confronted his mother and forced her to leave him alone. But she never changed. She gambled herself to ruin, eventually losing her life because of it. Ethan blamed it all on me. I knew he resented me, resented my strictness, resented my harsh training methods. After his mother died, the hatred in his eyes toward me only grew stronger. Eventually, that resentment exploded. Ethan's fans threatened me. They harassed my parents. "Having a daughter like that, you must be terrible people. Too. Tell her to go die already." And so, I did as they wished. I ended my life in a bathtub. When I opened my eyes again, I was back at the audition scene. Ethan Cole was performing an awkward, embarrassing scene. Laughter erupted from backstage, but he stood there confidently, his face still carrying that familiar arrogance. His simple hairstyle made him look even sharper, and his intense gaze was locked on me. I remembered what I'd said to him once. "If you want to be an actor, I'll help you." That promise of mine had given him a confidence he didn't deserve. Zoe nudged me with her elbow. "Rachel, you're the only one who hasn't chosen yet. David and I still prefer the more talented candidates. But this guy seems like your type. You could take him in and train him." I nodded at Zoe and, without hesitation, held up the fail sign. Ethan froze, his expression collapsing instantly. Confusion clouded his gaze, his mouth dropping slightly. Zoe stared at me in disbelief. "Aren't you the best at managing these pretty boys? Why not take him? If he doesn't improve, you can let him go when the contract ends." I stared at Ethan Cole and said, "He's not worthy of my time." His face turned red with anger. His hands clenched into fists, and under the sound of mocking laughter, he stormed out of the room. Next up was a boy who looked about 1.8 meters tall. He wasn't particularly eye-catching, but his features were clean and proper. Nervously, he stepped to the center of the room. After taking several deep breaths, he began his performance. His acting wasn't much better than Ethan's, and Chanjie and the others shook their heads, signaling their disapproval. But I raised the pass card. In my previous life, Ryan Mitchell didn't pass our company's auditions. He signed with a small studio instead. While Ethan was starring as the male lead, Ryan spent his time playing extras, but he never stopped improving. Whenever he had the time, he enrolled in acting classes. Over the years, he climbed his way up from supporting roles to leading roles, and his progress surprised me. At the Surprise Film Festival, he was even nominated for Best Actor. Unfortunately, the movie he invested everything into lacked funding and marketing, so it flopped. I heard he had poured his entire savings into that film, but it ended in failure. For an actor, a good movie can be the key to winning awards, and Ethan had taken full advantage of that. Even though Ethan didn't win the Best Actor award, he still managed to clap graciously for his opponent. But this time, I would help Ryan. As I walked to the parking lot, someone suddenly blocked my way. A cold voice came from above me. "Didn't you say you'd help me?" I looked up at him. Ethan Cole. A dog who never learned loyalty. Why should I waste my efforts again? Without a word, I turned and walked away. That very day, our company was trending online. Ethan Cole had signed with our competitor, One Heart Entertainment. Netizens mocked us relentlessly. Seriously? You passed up on a handsome guy like that to sign someone so mediocre? Is your manager brain dead? I'd watch Ethan even if his acting sucked. Who cares? He's hot. Signed up for the Ethan Cole fan club. Sorry, not sorry. The boss's face darkened as he scrolled through the comments. Rachel, are you insane? Your artists have always represented our company's standards for looks. And you signed. That guy. Boss, watch your wording. I said calmly. I can guarantee you this. Within 3 years, Ryan Mitchell will shine brighter than anyone. The boss let out a sarcastic laugh. If you told me Ethan Cole would blow up because of his looks, I'd believe it. But Ryan? Impossible. I'll stake my career on it. If I fail, I'll personally take responsibility for any losses. Seeing how determined I was, the boss didn't say anything more. When I opened the door, I found Ryan standing there with his head hanging low, looking guilty. I'm sorry, Rachel. I didn't mean to put you in a tough spot. If you want to cancel my contract, I won't ask for compensation. I patted his shoulder reassuringly. Don't overthink it. I signed you because I believe in you. In my previous life, when I was helping Ethan rehearse on set, I often saw Ryan practicing alone on the sidelines. Even for a single line of dialogue, he would repeat it dozens of times until he found the perfect delivery. He might not have been a natural-born genius, but his hard work was enough to surpass one. Of course, the other managers in the company seized this opportunity to gossip behind my back. They had always looked down on the fact that I worked with pretty boys. Yet my artists still landed the best resources. Now that I'd signed Ryan, they pounced on the chance to tear me down. Rachel, you've always been good at picking trending stars. How did you screw up so badly this time? I turned and looked at them dismissively. At least my artists are famous. What about yours? That shut them up quickly. I had Ryan move into the trainee apartment and set up a strict daily schedule for him. What he lacked naturally, we would make up for with hard work. Most importantly, I placed a mirror by his bed and instructed him to practice facial expressions for at least half an hour every day. He followed my instructions to the letter, even sending me videos to prove he'd done it. Ethan Cole, on the other hand, used to say, Rachel, with this face, do I really need expression training? I could make any expression and still drive my fans wild. I didn't agree. It was exactly because I managed good-looking stars that people mocked me as a pretty boy manager. I wanted to prove myself and shake off that label, so I had bet everything on Ethan. But every time I tried to push him, he'd grow impatient, even whining to his fan groups about how strict I was. My inbox would blow up with angry messages from his fans telling me to treat their precious Ethan better. After 2 months of grueling training, I asked Ryan, aren't you tired of all this? He shook his head. Not at all. Whatever you ask me to do, I'll do it. I ruffled his hair approvingly. Unlike others, he was focused and obedient. Over the next few months, I enrolled him in posture and fashion classes. Even though he wasn't the tallest in the industry, his overall presence had improved significantly. All he needed now was to keep working with me. I'll make him into a superstar. I lined up a small supporting role for Ryan Mitchell. It wasn't a big part, but the role itself was challenging. For the week leading up to filming, I saw him in the practice room every day, repeatedly rehearsing the lines and actions. Pushing the door open, I said, "Ryan, you've practiced those lines and movements enough. Take a break." Wiping the sweat from his face, he smiled at me with that pure, earnest expression. "This is the first time I've had a role with so many lines. I have to make the most of it. I can't let you down, Rachel." In truth, he only had about 20 lines, but compared to his previous roles, where he'd had maybe one line or even just a silhouette, this was a huge opportunity. When you've never truly had something before, you learn to treasure every bit of it. I couldn't help but think back to Ethan Cole's first role. It was a fourth male lead, but he tossed the script aside and scoffed. "I'm not doing it, Rachel. My face was born for leading roles. If I'm not the male lead, I'm at least the tragic second lead." He'd lounged arrogantly in his chair, legs crossed, toying with his expensive watch. Every time I lost my temper with him, he'd remind me, "You're the one who promised my dad at his grave that you'd take care of me." What? Regretting it now. I was regretting it. Regretting that I hadn't slapped him across the face when I had the chance. Ryan performed exceptionally in his small role. The producer was so impressed that he recommended us for an audition for a third male lead in a new project. Ryan wasn't the same boy from 6 months ago. Under my careful guidance, his presence had transformed, and his acting skills had improved dramatically. But that day, nerves got the better of him. He stumbled during the crying scene and didn't quite hit the mark. It was disappointing, but I patted his shoulder and said, "It's okay. We've only just started. One failure doesn't mean anything." "Isn't this Rachel, the manager?" A sharp, sarcastic voice interrupted me before I could finish. It was Anna Howell, Ethan Cole's manager from One Heart Entertainment. When she signed Ethan, she boasted online that she would turn him into a star with both popularity and acting skill. I glanced behind her, and sure enough, Ethan stood there, as composed and confident as ever. But something was different. His eyes had lost some of their arrogance. Anna sneered. "What's wrong, Rachel? Did your boy flop in the audition? Thanks for clearing the path for Ethan." Ethan shot me a glance before heading inside. Surprisingly, he performed well. Nothing like the awkward mess I remembered from the audition. His acting reminded me of his prime, back when he had won the Best Actor award. I couldn't help but feel startled. Anna laughed smugly beside me. "See? He's not just a pretty face. He's a natural-born acting genius. Perfect. Absolutely perfect." She walked off to find Ethan, but to my surprise, he walked straight toward me instead. Lowering his head slightly, he said, "This time, I'll listen to you. Will you still sign me?" Of course, he had been reborn, too. But some things, once lost, are lost forever. "You're a dog that can't be trusted." I thought to myself, I won't make the same mistake twice. Anna grabbed Ethan by the arm, clearly agitated. "What are you doing? I'm the one who signed you. Stop wasting your time on her." Ethan said nothing, just stared at me in silence. But I focused all my attention on Ryan, comforting him as we left the set. On the way back, he noticed something was off. "Rachel, did I do so badly that you're disappointed in me?" I shook my head. "No, I just saw an old dog that bit me once. Just remember," I continued, "what matters now is learning the roles that suit you, no matter how big or small." News broke soon after that Ethan had landed the third male lead role. It immediately trended online, and the internet was filled with ridicule toward Ryan. Ethan even posted smugly, "Some people just don't know a good thing when they see it. I'll make sure they regret it." Clearly, the some people he meant was me. It was laughable. Even given a second chance, I'd never choose Ethan again. Anyone who thought otherwise had to be out of their mind. Ironically, all the buzz only ended up boosting Ryan's visibility. Offers started rolling in for him, but they were all for villain roles. And the lead actor in every one of those projects was Ethan Cole. Clearly, they were trying to ride the wave of the controversy. Among the many invitations, I noticed a variety show called Future Best Actor. It was a competition where rookie actors competed in acting challenges, with a final champion crowned at the end. It was the perfect chance for Ryan to build his reputation and improve his skills. When we arrived on set, I wasn't surprised to see Anna Howell and Ethan Cole there. Ethan was lounging arrogantly in a chair, his legs crossed like always. Lately, his career had been skyrocketing, 2 idol dramas back to back, and he'd gained a massive following of young female fans. Anna spotted me immediately and flashed a fake smile. "Rachel, you're here too." Anna Howell smirked as she glanced at me. "But you might as well withdraw now. The champion will definitely be Ethan." I rolled my eyes and ignored her. As I passed Ethan Cole, he said coldly, "Do you really think you can push Ryan Mitchell to where I once stood? Stop dreaming. I'm the reason you became a gold medal manager." It was all because of this face. Even with a second chance at life, he was still this delusional. I couldn't even look at him like a normal person anymore. Someone like him, so arrogant, would only fall harder the higher he climbed. "Is that so?" I replied calmly. "I look forward to the day you fall." His face darkened, but I knew the truth. In my last life, no one else could have propelled Ethan to where he was. No one, not even Anna Howell. Meanwhile, Ryan had retreated, curling up in the stairwell with his arms wrapped around his knees. "Rachel," he whispered faintly, "maybe I should drop out." At the same time, Ethan's acting skills had rapidly improved, and he had already landed lead roles. I thought back to my younger self, who had been so melancholic and insecure, feeling small whenever I saw someone else shining. "Ryan, this is the last time I'm telling you," I said firmly. "I don't regret signing you, but if you give up like this, then I'll regret it." He looked up at me, his eyes clouded with confusion, a look I had never once seen on Ethan. Ethan had never faced struggles like this. Thanks to his face, he had always received preferential treatment. He would never understand how hard it was for ordinary people to grow. The program began as scheduled. To boost ratings, the producers had arranged for the managers to sit in an observation room. They cleverly placed me and Anna right in the center, complete with 2 cameras pointed directly at us, ready to capture every subtle expression. The competition started with each contestant performing a dramatic scene. Ryan's role was that of a husband grieving at his wife's grave. His delivery of the lines and his crying scene were both handled beautifully. Even the other managers couldn't help but praise him. "He's really come a long way," someone murmured. "He's got potential." I smiled, proud of him. But Anna scoffed, clearly unhappy. "That's considered good acting? Just wait until you see Ethan." Ethan played a police officer interrogating a suspect, but instead of immersing himself in the character, he spent the entire time showing off his jawline, because in his mind, his jawline was sharper than anyone's lifeline. Without me there to stop him, he indulged himself completely. The whole performance was greasy and exaggerated. "Look at him." Anna clapped excitedly. "Isn't he handsome? And that jawline. Perfection." I glanced at her exaggerated applause and thought to myself, you need to eat something better. The judges had a hard time critiquing Ethan's performance. In the end, they simply said, "Ethan Cole is a textbook idol male lead." Anyone with a shred of intelligence knew what that really meant. But to Ethan's fans, this was a glowing compliment. "See? Even the professionals say our Ethan is born to play leading roles. Those other nobodies should just get lost." I sighed. The apple truly doesn't fall far from the tree. Next was the group segment, and the producers deliberately placed Ryan and Ethan in the same group. Anna smirked with a smug look. "Sorry, Rachel. Since Ethan's the lead, your boy can only play a bit part." I had known before coming that One Heart Entertainment had sponsored the show, but I wasn't worried, because 2 veteran actors, Mr. Zhang Zhong and Mr. Gu He, were among the judges. In my last life, I had taken Ethan to visit these 2 senior actors. We'd been a few minutes late, and they had lectured us for an hour. Both had long since stopped acting, but the production team had brought them on board to lend credibility to the show. With the 2 veterans on the panel, Anna and the others wouldn't dare pull any obvious tricks. They would have to operate in the shadows. Few days later, The first group performance began. Ethan played an undercover cop, the main character, while Ryan played a hostage with only one line. During the scene, Ethan kept angling his face so his left side faced the camera. He was convinced his left side looked better. But instead of portraying righteousness, his excessive expressions made him look smug and overconfident. Ryan, on the other hand, stayed in character the entire time, whether or not the camera was on him, just as I had instructed. When the performance ended, the judges were silent for a moment. Finally, Mr. Guhi spoke up. The only one I noticed during that performance was Ryan Mitchell. Mr. Zhang nodded in agreement. Ethan, who was used to constant praise, couldn't hold back. Maybe you've been out of the acting game for too long. You just don't understand what young audiences like these days. I suggest you watch some of my recent dramas. The room fell completely silent. Even Anna froze in shock. She quickly dragged Ethan backstage, frantically signaling the production crew to stop filming. A swarm of staff members rushed in to shut off cameras and check for recordings. Anna pulled Ethan aside to apologize profusely to the judges and arranged for him to re-record the scene. Only then did she relax a little. How could I possibly let them have it easy? If they had planted people among the production crew, did they think I wouldn't do the same? A video of Ethan Cole arguing with veteran actors exploded online. Soon after, actors and directors who had worked with him in the past came forward to criticize him, saying he was uncooperative on set, always throwing tantrums, and insisting on wearing his own clothes instead of the costume. The scandal stuck, and Ethan was branded as rude and difficult to work with. While his fanbase managed to control some of the heat, the general public wasn't so easily fooled. People flooded social media, condemning him. They could buy bots, but so could I. I decided to push the narrative further. Why stop when people were already suspicious? I bought a wave of online commentators to lead the charge against Ethan. From then on, Ethan gained a new nickname, the Young Master. It was, of course, pure mockery. Meanwhile, Ryan Mitchell's name was finally being noticed. People praised his acting and said he had a bright future ahead of him. Seeing those comments made me feel truly satisfied. My phone rang. On the other end was Ethan's cold voice. Do you really want to ruin me this badly? I already know the truth about my mother. Can't you give me another chance? Do you have to destroy me to feel happy? Faced with his accusations, I felt nothing. Compared to that night when he publicly denounced me, this was nothing. Yes, I replied indifferently. Seeing you fall to ruin is exactly what I want. One Heart Entertainment immediately launched emergency PR efforts. They not only announced that Ethan would withdraw from the variety show, but also released a handwritten apology letter, supposedly written by Ethan. I could tell at a glance that it wasn't his own writing. In my last life, when he offended senior actors on a show, I had to force him to write an apology letter. He had refused until the very end, so I ended up writing it for him. The PR team followed the same old playbook, having Ethan attend charity events to clean up his image. It was an unimaginative and tired strategy. Meanwhile, I continued to focus on Ryan. His rising popularity had even softened our boss's attitude toward me, so I proposed sponsoring the show. The boss immediately negotiated the partnership. With our company's involvement, One Heart Entertainment wouldn't dare play any more tricks. After all, it wouldn't look good for them. Behind the scenes, I took Ryan to visit veteran actors Mr. Zhang and Mr. Gu He, seeking their guidance in acting. The two seniors were impressed by his dedication. It's rare to see this kind of humility and willingness to learn in today's entertainment industry, they remarked. It was true. Most young actors today focused on generating online traffic and didn't care about the quality of their work. But I was determined to take the opposite approach. I believed that one day, the industry would once again value skill over hype. Ryan steadily advanced through the competition, eventually winning the championship. The night he won, countless scripts were sent my way. I nearly couldn't decide which ones to choose. But I didn't just pick roles where he'd play the lead. What mattered more was the character itself. I selected 2 scripts for him. One where he'd play a police officer and another where he'd take on the challenging role of a mentally disabled young man. After the show ended, Ryan immediately began shooting the films. Even while filming, he continued participating in charity events. One day he was feeding tigers. The next he was caring for pandas. But I noticed his smile in the photos was starting to look strained. Sure enough, that evening, I overheard Ethan Cole and Anna Howell arguing in a hotel hallway. You must be joking. Ethan snapped. You want me to make a cameo in Ryan Mitchell's movie? Have you lost your mind? Do you still not understand your situation? Anna shot back. You're barely holding on right now. And you're acting like you're still the next big thing. Ethan was furious. It's not my fault you're useless. Anna, Rachel managed to get me great roles back then. Why can't you do the same? I'll tell the company I want a new manager. Anna's voice trembled with rage. Fine. Ethan Cole. That's how you feel. You're on your own. She stormed off, slamming the door behind her. Shortly after, One Heart Entertainment's official account stopped updating any news about Ethan. Even his personal social media fell silent. I didn't need to guess where he was. He was likely hiding in some nightclub, partying like there was no tomorrow. In my last life, I covered up countless scandals of him clubbing and drinking. Looking back now, I realized how stupid I'd been. Meanwhile, Ryan followed my every instruction diligently. On set, he focused solely on his acting. I kept up the relationships behind the scenes, ensuring everything went smoothly. Every few days, I arranged food trucks and water stations for the crew. I also encouraged Ryan to talk with the extras, listening to their experiences. Extras might not have big roles, but they were often the most experienced actors on set. Their stories gave Ryan valuable insights, and their support created a genuine and positive reputation for him. A well-marketed image was nothing compared to a reputation built on word of mouth. After every project wrapped up, the extras would post online, praising Ryan for his kindness and hard work. Praise from the bottom rung of the industry was often the most believable and earned. Ryan was progressing step by step, steadily climbing his way to the top. But just when everything seemed perfect, Star Entertainment suddenly announced a major new project featuring Ethan Cole. That was the largest entertainment company in the country. The resources they held were far beyond anything our company could match. The very next day, a call came in from the drama we had negotiated for Ryan Mitchell. They abruptly claimed he wasn't suitable for the role. By the afternoon, they announced that Ethan Cole had been cast as the male lead instead. As if that weren't enough, worse news hit soon after. Paparazzi exposed a scandal, claiming that during his college years, Ryan had been in a relationship and that the girl had become pregnant. The woman even came forward publicly to confirm the story. Suddenly, all of our partners called, demanding to terminate their contracts. The total penalties for breaking those contracts added up to nearly $10 million. The boss sat in his chair, holding his head in frustration. Rachel, he growled, didn't you say you'd take responsibility for the consequences? Tell me, how are you going to fix this? Before I could answer, Ryan pushed the office door open and said firmly, don't give Rachel a hard time. I'll take full responsibility for this. He grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the room. Once we were outside, I turned to him and asked, is it true? He hesitated before nodding. Yes, it's true. I dated her in college, and she got pregnant. When I found out, I wanted to take responsibility, but she disappeared. I didn't know where she went. Of course, when I first signed Ryan, I had done a thorough background check. I knew about the relationship, but it wasn't a big deal. Actors are allowed to have personal lives. The key issue was whether he had failed to take responsibility. But now, the woman was writing multiple posts online, accusing Ryan relentlessly. There was no doubt in my mind that someone was behind this. I tracked her IP address, but it led to an internet cafe. Clearly, someone didn't want me to know where she really was. As I turned to leave, I saw a familiar face, Ethan Cole. He had gone for a trendy new look. His hair dyed gold and sparkling in the sunlight. His smile was as smug as ever. Rachel, he drawled, I told you that kid was going nowhere. You should have signed me instead. I walked up to him and asked coldly, you're the one behind this, aren't you? His face feigned innocence. Don't accuse me of things. Rachel, you know me. I don't have that kind of influence. Then get out of my way. I shoved him aside and left without another word. I paid off the owner of the internet cafe, instructing him to alert me the next time the woman showed up. After a few days, I got the call. I disguised myself and sat down next to her. She was furiously typing a new round of accusations online. Casually, I said, "Do you know the maximum sentence for framing someone? It's up to 10 years in prison." Her hands froze mid-typing. She looked at me in panic. "I don't know what you're talking about." She grabbed her bag and tried to leave, but I dragged her into a private room. I pressed further. 10 years. I repeated. She continued to deny everything, pretending to be clueless. I tossed a stack of documents in front of her, proof that she had gone for a checkup in July 2018 and had been pregnant for over a month. The problem? 2 months before that, Ryan had been out of town for a club activity. The timeline didn't add up. The child couldn't have been his. She fell to her knees, trembling. "I don't want to go to jail. Please. I don't want to go to jail. We won't press charges," I said coldly, "as long as you tell me who's behind this." After a moment of hesitation, she whispered, "It's Joanna Wong from the International Group. She's also the owner of Star Entertainment." So that's how it was. Ethan Cole had latched onto someone powerful. Under my pressure, the woman posted a public clarification, clearing Ryan's name. But even so, the damage was done. Public perception doesn't change overnight. People see the initial scandal but rarely pay attention to the retraction. I didn't care. As long as we stayed steady, we could recover. But we were blocked at every turn. Every project and endorsement we considered. Ethan Cole managed to worm his way in. Whether he was suited for the role or not, he took it. The result? He ruined every project he touched. Lost in thought one day, I was suddenly taken to a high-end restaurant. Across the table sat 2 people. A manager from Star Entertainment and Ryan Mitchell. "Look at him," Ethan sneered, sitting smugly at the table. "The boy you worked so hard to bring up is about to betray you. Wouldn't it have been better if you had just signed me? We could have been unstoppable. You the sword, and me the blade." As I turned to leave, I accidentally made a noise. Ryan immediately stood up and ran after me. "Rachel, it's not what you think," he said desperately. "They did offer to sign me." Ryan started, but I covered his mouth with my hand, signaling him to stop. "I trust you." That moment, a memory surfaced. I finally remembered where I had seen him before. It was during the summer after my junior year of college. I was on my way home when I saw a 10-year-old boy acting in front of a mirror on the street. Curious, I approached him and asked, "Do you want to be an actor someday?" His young face lit up with innocence. "Really? But I'm not very smart." "Even if you're not a genius, hard work can always surpass talent," I had told him. It was me who had encouraged him to walk this path. Now I understood why. In my last life, there was always something meaningful in the way he looked at me. "Ryan, do you trust me?" I asked. He nodded firmly. I reached out to every journalist I knew and released a video of Ethan Cole partying at a nightclub. I knew all too well what he was like behind the scenes. In my past life, I had kept a tight leash on him, preventing him from causing major trouble. Even so, he often snuck out to meet girls and go dancing, calling it his recharge time as a man. The video was explicit, with his words too crude to ignore. It went viral immediately. Star Entertainment tried to suppress it, but it was too late. There was no stopping something this explosive. Ethan, who already had no favor with the general public, completely fell apart. Of course, his obsessive fans jumped to his defense. So what if a guy goes to nightclubs? He's handsome. It's fine if he's a little flirtatious. If Ethan asked me out, I wouldn't say no. Their comments dominated the trending page, but most people just rolled their eyes at them. Fan loyalty didn't matter when producers saw their investments at risk. Scripts that once had Ethan as the lead were quickly recast. Star Entertainment pressured the producers, but no one would compromise their profits for Ethan. I quietly sat at home, waiting. The phone calls came one after another. During this period, I didn't let Ryan sit idle. I arranged for him to visit sets where we knew extras and crew members. He filmed several vlogs during these visits, building a solid and relatable image among the public, something Ethan Cole couldn't compete with. With that momentum, I secured a role for Ryan in a major blockbuster film. As long as he gave it his all, this movie would propel him into the A-list. While we were busy preparing for the shoot, Ethan was frantically trying to salvage his reputation. This time, Star Entertainment resorted to something truly ridiculous. Ethan was forced to kneel during a live-streamed apology, but after so long without real acting work, his skills had deteriorated. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't squeeze out a single tear. The comments exploded with mockery, and he ended the broadcast in disgrace. Desperate, Star Entertainment played their final card. They partnered with a charity organization, sending Ethan to work as a teacher at a school for children with intellectual disabilities. To add weight to the stunt, they donated $500,000 to the charity. Ethan began live streaming daily, showcasing his kind heart and caring nature. Surprisingly, he managed to keep up the act for half a year. But in those 6 months, Ryan filmed 2 movies back-to-back. Both had top-tier production teams and veteran actors. When filming wrapped, Ryan received nothing but praise from the cast and crew. I then arranged for Ryan to do charity work. Not to compete with Ethan, but because a local organization approached us. They hoped we could serve as ambassadors to raise awareness for their rural children's support program. Watching the photos of those young, innocent faces on screen brought tears to my eyes. Before I turned 10, I had been a left-behind child. 2. Constantly waiting for my parents to return home. Ryan noticed my emotions and worked harder during the campaign. His efforts paid off. He was now both talented and compassionate, a star who had earned both popularity and respect. Even the boss gave me a thumbs up. "Rachel, you really have an eye for talent. You found a real gem this time." "A gem?" I thought bitterly. It only cost me an entire lifetime to find him. Ethan, meanwhile, was watching Ryan's career soar while he remained stuck pretending to be kind-hearted. I could tell his frustration was eating him alive. Sweating nervously, he did what he always did. He turned to his sugar mama, Joanna Wong, for help. What he didn't know was that I had planted someone inside the charity association long ago. I watched as he dialed Joanna. "Sweetheart," he whined. "I can't stand being here anymore. It's my fault. I shouldn't have gone to the nightclub. I swear I won't do it again. Just come see me, please. I miss you." On the other end of the line, Joanna's voice was calm as she agreed. That night, a luxury sports car parked discreetly at the back entrance of the employee dormitory. To avoid being seen, they hid in the storage room. Naturally, the one I had carefully prepared. Locked from the outside, the two of them clung to each other as if they wanted to melt into one. Soon, their embrace turned into something far more intimate, their heavy breathing mixing in the small space, completely oblivious to the camera hidden in the shadows. From my end, I watched the live feed, the two of them burning with passion. It was such a spectacle that I couldn't help but chuckle. I immediately logged into an anonymous account and posted, "If you want to see the action live, head to the storage room at the very end of the 3rd floor of the employee dormitory." After sending the message, I logged off. Within moments, the entire dormitory building lit up like daylight. Reporters carrying cameras swarmed the halls, rushing toward the scene. Star Entertainment staff tried to stop them, but there was no way they could hold back so many people. The storage room door was forced open, and the two people inside, deep in a heated kiss, froze, stunned, panicking. They covered their heads and bolted in different directions. Joanna Wong was quickly escorted to a car by her family's bodyguards. Ethan Cole tried to follow her, but a bodyguard kicked him back down. Defeated, he curled up in a corner, arms wrapped protectively over his head, until the police arrived to bring order. That night, Ethan Cole became the biggest joke on the internet. Star Entertainment immediately announced that they were terminating his contract. All of his endorsements were pulled, and he was forced to pay a massive amount in penalties for breaching his contracts. That moment, Ethan was left with nothing. Meanwhile, Ryan Mitchell's movie premiered and was met with widespread acclaim. Industry insiders believed he had a strong chance of being nominated for Best New Actor. Sure enough, he achieved it. On awards night, Ryan stood tall on stage in a sharp, well-fitted suit, completely unrecognizable from the shy boy I had first met. His every move exuded elegance and class. The following year, Ryan won Best Actor for his role in Human Realm. Tears welled in his eyes as he stood on the podium. His voice choked with emotion. "I owe all of this to Rachel. If she hadn't signed me back then, I wouldn't be here today." The audience erupted into applause. Tears blurred my vision as well. I couldn't help but think back to another boy who once stood on this stage. But all he had brought me was disaster. Now, Ryan had brought me honor and pride. Some people will never know how to be grateful, and losing them is no real loss. After Ryan's Best Actor win, I officially earned the title of Gold Medal Manager. My office was moved to the one right next to the boss's, symbolizing my growing influence. I had reached this position in my past life as well, but the view this time was completely different. Then, I received a call from the police station. They asked me to come identify Ethan Cole's body. He was lying there, lifeless. I sighed. Of course it was his mother who had shown up. She must have squeezed him dry for every cent he had left. In the end, they had jumped into a river together. I signed the papers and arranged for his body to be sent to the funeral home. Then, I took his ashes back to his hometown. At the very least, I could let him return to where he came from. It was such a waste. With a second chance, I had made the right choices. While he had walked down a path of no return, my career only continued to flourish. Though Ryan eventually expressed his feelings for me, I turned him down. I chose to maintain a purely professional relationship with him. This way, we could maximize our mutual success and benefits. I'm dying. On the hospital bed. My children surround me, crying and sobbing. My gaze falls on the silent man at the back of the crowd. James. James has aged. His once tall, proud posture now slightly stoops. His eyes are red as he says, "Vivian, spending decades as your husband has been the greatest blessing of my life. If there's an afterlife, I still want to spend it as your husband." I smile faintly. On the bedside table sits a bouquet of white roses, brought by someone I don't know. If there's an afterlife, I think to myself, I wouldn't do this again. As the ventilator emits a long, continuous beep, I slip into unconsciousness. In my final moments, a pair of aged, trembling hands clasp mine tightly. Warm tears fall onto my skin as James's voice trembles. "Vivian, I love you." I've waited 50 years to say these words. The quiet, reserved man finally speaks his heart at the end of my life. But none of it matters anymore. I no longer love him. The love that had once carried us from campus days to the wedding altar had long been worn away by the grind of daily life. James would come home exhausted from work, and one time I accidentally spilled a bottle of milk. His brows furrowed impatiently. "Vivian, why are you always so careless?" he snapped. I froze, embarrassed and at a loss. I took the laundry he tossed at me, catching a faint scent of iris perfume on his jacket. Furious, I demanded, "Whose perfume is this?" James just looked at me coldly. "Vivian, you've changed. You used to be kind and gentle. Now, you're no better than a nagging shrew." Was it me who had changed? Or had James? I decided to divorce him. Family members rushed to stop me. "Vivian, there's no conflict in marriage that lasts overnight. If you divorce him, what about Toby and Lily? Are you going to abandon your own children?" I silently wept, watching my mischievous kids as I cleaned up the messes they made. A relative sighed. "Besides, what man doesn't stray a little? Just focus on the kids and endure it. It'll pass." Endure it? I endured for 50 years. From a graceful young woman to a gray-haired old lady. From an energetic career woman to a bedridden patient. I endured. Finally, I am free. The buzzing of cicadas fills my ears. I open my eyes slowly, only to see the reflection of a beautiful young girl in the mirror. I'm stunned. My long-deceased mother calls from the kitchen. "Vivian, come set the table and wash your hands for dinner." It isn't until she touches my forehead, concerned, that I reluctantly accept the truth. I've returned to being 18 years old. Looking at my mother's caring eyes, I throw myself into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. My mother is bewildered. "What's wrong? Silly girl. Why are you crying?" In my past life, I gave birth to James's child while enduring a difficult labor. James's mother refused to allow a C-section, and my mother knelt on the hospital floor, begging the doctors to give me an epidural. Nearly 50 years old, my mother knelt and kowtowed, pleading with James's family and the doctors. I lay powerless on the hospital bed. When I began to hemorrhage, my mother rolled up her sleeves and offered her blood without hesitation. I survived, but my mother's health never recovered. She passed away in a hospital bed, her breathing fading before my helpless eyes. That wound in my heart has never healed. After crying my heart out, my father looks at me with a puzzled smile. Vivian, what's wrong with you today? Excited for your first day at college? I hug him tightly. My father looks even more confused. In my past life, he couldn't donate blood to save me, so he anxiously paced in the hospital, though he lived a long life. He spent his last years alone in the old family home, rocking on a creaky chair until he quietly passed away. Now, seeing my parents' loving, doting smiles, I feel an overwhelming warmth. At the dinner table, my mother casually asks, Vivian, how are things going with James lately? My hand freezes mid-air as I reach for food, pretending to be indifferent. I reply, we broke up. Both my parents are shocked. Why did you break up? Isn't James a great guy? I set down my chopsticks and look at them calmly. Mom, Dad, James cheated on me. The high-end iris perfume on his suit? That's from Sarah, his admirer. Sarah had chased after James since high school. Even after we got together in college, she never gave up. At our wedding, James had the audacity to introduce her to me, a stunning career woman, every bit as beautiful as me, exuding that signature iris scent. She smiled slyly and said, Hi, I'm Sarah, James's high school admirer. Awkwardly, I extended my hand. Hi, I'm Vivian. The iris scent was like an impenetrable wall, lingering on James's clothes and between us. He had long been infatuated with Sarah, unable to extricate himself. My recollections end there. I told my parents everything about Sarah. Both of them widened their eyes in shock. My father slammed his chopsticks on the table and said furiously, Unbelievable. That boy seems so steady and reliable. But he pulled something like this. My mother hurried to calm him down. Perhaps their love had been so perfect that it made me once believe my relationship with James could be special too. After a long sigh, my father said, When he was pursuing you, he swore to me he'd treasure you. He even knelt before me. I never expected this. I tried to calm him down. Dad, don't get too angry. It's not worth it. After packing my things, I set off for college. Walking through the familiar streets, I couldn't help humming a tune, having this second chance at life. I was determined not to have any connection with James or his family, especially James. Stumbling my way toward the campus gates, I suddenly saw a tall and familiar figure in the distance. My heart sank instantly, but as I got closer, I realized it wasn't James. It was just someone with the same tall, upright posture whose silhouette looked remarkably similar from afar. One of the welcoming upperclassmen noticed me and his eyes lit up. Hey, freshman. I'm William. He eagerly offered to help me with my luggage. We made small talk along the way. Casually, he asked, Which high school did you go to? I answered, Lincoln High, Class 2C. Why? He simply replied, Oh, and said no more. But a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Then, scratching the back of his head shyly, he asked, Do you remember me? I vaguely recalled that there had been a senior with the last name Williams who had a crush on me back in high school. As we arrived at my dorm building, I took my luggage and looked at him calmly. This is far enough. William. Thank you. He lowered his head in disappointment but quickly mustered the courage to ask, Vivian, can I treat you to dinner? I felt a headache coming on, unsure how to politely decline this energetic and persistent young man. But as I looked up, I suddenly noticed someone across the way. My breath caught. Standing at the entrance of the women's dorm, panting slightly, was James. My heart dropped, and I blurted out, James, what are you doing here? This point in time, James should have been busy with some academic discussion. As for the person he was discussing things with, only the faint scent of perfume could answer that. James's voice was dry as he looked at me, his gaze flickering. Vivian. It's me. So James had also been reborn. Without saying a word, he pulled me into an embrace, holding me tightly as if clutching some long-lost treasure. Vivian, we finally have another chance. This time, I'll treat you right. We'll have a son and a daughter. I'll do the laundry, work hard, and buy us a big house. The memory of spilled milk resurfaced vividly in my mind. spreading like a sticky mess down my spine. I couldn't suppress a shiver as I pushed him away firmly. James, we're done. Let's break up. James stared at me in disbelief, then chuckled indulgently. Vivian, don't be ridiculous. But as he held me, I saw Sarah standing not far away. Her face was filled with bitterness, and she swayed slightly, as though struggling to stand. The faint scent of iris on James's collar hit me once more. Even with a second chance, James had still repeated the same mistakes. Noticing my gaze on Sarah, James's expression grew panicked. We were just discussing academics, he explained quickly. Discussing academics again? You're just a regular college student. Do you really think there's so much academic work for you to discuss every day? I snapped. James, who do you think you are? It was the first time I'd ever spoken to him so directly. James seemed stunned, as though he couldn't believe I would say something so blunt. People bustled around us, and he seemed increasingly uncomfortable. Lowering his voice, he said, Vivian, let's talk somewhere else. Okay, don't you want to see Toby and Lily again? Toby and Lily, my twins, born after a grueling labor. After their birth, my maternal instincts overwhelmed me, and I couldn't bear to leave their side. James cleverly used this opportunity to distance himself from parental responsibilities. I remembered how he once spilled our daughter's formula on purpose, then complained, I'm a man. How am I supposed to handle this stuff? Vivian, you take care of it. I asked James to change our son's diaper once, and he pretended to get a phone call. His acting was painfully amateur. Hello? Mr. Wong. I'll head to the office right away. My wife is insisting I look after the baby. You know how women are, he said before disappearing for the night. When he returned, his body reeked of unfamiliar perfume. Whenever this happened, he would bring me a bouquet of flowers or make some kind of gesture, as if trying to make up for his wrongdoings. His insincere attempts were accompanied by the voices of his relatives echoing in my head, urging me to be more forgiving, to focus on the children, to silently wash his underwear while he indulged himself outside. After a night of revelry, James would return, his mood restored, leaving me to quietly endure it all. But not this time. I shook off his hand with force. He looked at me, startled, and quickly said, But our kids were so adorable. Don't you want to go back to those happy family moments? Happy family moments? I shot back. You mean your family's happiness? The James family's happiness? What does that have to do with me? I've always been an outsider. At New Year gatherings, I was always the one stuck in the kitchen. Even during the bitter cold of winter, I would work myself into a sweat, only to be criticized for being too slow. This is your family, James, I said coldly. It's never been my home. My real home fell apart the day my mother passed away. My parents died, leaving me, their only daughter, struggling to survive in a family that wasn't mine. Under the midday sun, James and I stood face to face, surrounded by onlookers. Their curious, judgmental gazes bore into us. Flustered, James fumbled through his bag, trying to pull something out, but I didn't give him a chance. I, Vivian White, swear to never have any ties with James Carter again. If I go back on this vow, may I be struck by lightning. My words cut through the air like a blade. James's face twisted in disbelief as he reached out to grab my arm. But William stepped in, his tall frame effortlessly shielding me. James, William said with a mocking smile, this is none of your business anymore. Vivian has made herself clear. She doesn't want anything to do with you. Still, James refused to back down. This is between me and my girlfriend, he insisted stubbornly. William let out a laugh, sharp and unapologetic. Girlfriend? James, are you deaf? Or just pretending? Vivian already said she wants nothing to do with you. To put it plainly, you're already broken up. If your hearing's that bad, head out the gate, turn left, and find the ear cleaning shop. $5 a session. The crowd burst into laughter, because everyone knew there wasn't an ear cleaning shop in that direction. Just a public restroom. James's face turned crimson, resembling an enraged bull. That moment, Sarah appeared, walking toward us with a feigned look of innocence. She clung to James's arm, her tone dripping with faux concern. Vivian, don't make things difficult for James. He's your ex-boyfriend. After all, I didn't hesitate to respond, my tone biting. Sarah, what's your problem? Do you like him that much? Her expression froze for a second before recovering, but James quickly removed her hand from his arm, looking flustered as he prepared to explain. Sarah, however, spoke up first, her voice lazy and nonchalant. And what if I do? You've already broken up. Don't I have the right to pursue my true love? The murmurs of the crowd grew louder. Well, they are broken up, someone said. If Sarah likes him, isn't it fair for her to go after him? I wanted to laugh. Such noble words. In my last life, Sarah hadn't just pursued James. She'd been the other woman in our marriage. Sarah's gaze was resolute as she began recounting her long history of unrequited love. Her words were crafted to tug at heartstrings, making her sound like a tragic heroine. When she finished, she gave me a triumphant glance before wrapping her arms tightly around James. And James, who only moments ago was desperately trying to win me back, now looked utterly bewitched by the softness pressed against him. I clenched my teeth in frustration, unable to reveal my secret of being reborn. The anger simmered in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. Just then, William, as nonchalant as ever, raised his phone, his sharp gaze fixed on them. What are you talking about? Homewrecker. All eyes turned toward William, who had his phone raised. On the screen was a photo of James and Sarah in an intimate embrace. The timestamp clearly showing it was taken just half an hour earlier. Sarah's face instantly paled. William, you're shameless. How dare you invade someone's privacy and take pictures like this? Feigning surprise, William smirked. So, you're admitting the photo is real? Then. He waved his hand nonchalantly and stuck out his tongue playfully. Relax. I didn't take this picture. I had a friend from the design department whip it up in a few minutes. I never expected you to get so flustered. But since you've already blown your own cover, should we take your pursuit of James as you willingly debasing yourself to be a homewrecker? That moment, James rushed over, his collar once again carrying the unmistakable scent of iris perfume. Everything was now clear. The photo might have been fake, but their affair was undeniable. James, proud as ever, couldn't handle the judgmental stares from the crowd. Furious, he shoved Sarah's arm away and fled the scene in embarrassment. Sarah's cheerful, confident exterior shattered as she glared at me with resentment. I met her gaze calmly and said, "He's not a man worth trusting. You'll regret this." For a moment, Sarah was stunned. Then, curling her lips into a mocking smile, she replied, "Vivian, I've known him far longer than you have. I understand him. I'll make sure I marry him." I sighed. Cross 2 lifetimes. Sarah's arrogance remained unchanged. I had already warned her. What happened next was her own choice. The crowd slowly dispersed, leaving me alone with William, who was clearly trying to sneak away. "Stop right there," called out. "How did you even know about their relationship?" William chuckled, scratching the back of his head. "I've known since high school. It was obvious those two would get tangled up sooner or later. But some pure, clueless white rose kept believing James was a good guy." A surge of frustration welled up in my chest as I clenched my teeth. "You're right. James isn't a good man. None of them are." William nearly tripped over himself, his eyes widening in shock, scratching his head again. He glanced up cautiously and asked, "What about me? Am I the same?" I studied him, my thoughts drifting to my previous life. After college, I'd heard William had gone abroad. After that, there had been no news of him. Keeping my tone cold, I replied, "Men only turn bad when they get rich. For now, you're still a good person." William let out a dramatic sigh of relief and grinned. "Then I guess I'll stay poor forever." Under the bright daylight, I turned to leave, but before I could take a step, a hand gently held my wrist. It wasn't the forceful grip James used to employ. William's touch was soft, almost cautious, as he encircled my wrist with his fingers. Looking up, I saw that his right hand, which had been holding his phone moments ago, now held a white rose. Dew glistened on its petals, reflecting the warmth and humor in his smiling eyes. I was surprised, and an unexpected shyness crept into my heart. Cross 2 lifetimes, this was the first time anyone had formally given me a rose. The tall, Handsome young man extended the flower toward me and said, "Vivian, about my earlier question, would you honor me with the chance to have dinner together?" After what he'd done to stand up for me, I couldn't refuse. "Sure," I said quietly. The restaurant he chose was elegant, clearly a deliberate choice. Even the vase on the table held a single rose, its delicate petals adding to the ambience. Sitting across from William, I couldn't help but feel that he had changed, yet somehow remained the same. Soft jazz played in the background as I glanced toward the entrance. To my surprise, I saw James working as a waiter, bowing deferentially and greeting customers with exaggerated politeness. He looked utterly pathetic. I suddenly remembered that during this time in his life, James had been working part-time to support himself. The restaurant owner wasn't known for being kind. In my previous life, James would come home complaining about his boss. Out of concern, I had written a lengthy letter, attaching homemade cookies, hoping it would earn him better treatment. It had worked. After that, James's job had become much easier. Sometimes, James would laugh as he recounted the story, saying, "Vivian, you're too soft-hearted. Why is this world so unfair?" I thought to myself, some people are born as trust fund kids, while others, like James, are stuck working menial jobs at restaurants just to scrape by. Back in those days, James would put his arm around my shoulder and, with a smug grin, say, "But being with you, Vivian, a rich and beautiful girl, makes it all worth it." I was young and naive then, and his words felt sweet and comforting. Now, they only left me feeling awkward and distant. At the dinner table, William grinned mischievously and asked, "Was that your ex-boyfriend?" I shook my head. "No, more like a criminal record." William burst out laughing, his laughter loud enough to catch James's attention. James's gaze locked on us, and his awkward smile froze before his face flushed deep red. He abandoned his task and approached us, his voice low and cautious. "Vivian, what are you doing here?" He glanced warily at William and added, "And you, don't even think about getting any ideas. She's mine." After decades of marriage, I knew James carried an intense sense of ownership over me, as though he believed I was an inseparable part of his life. I chuckled coldly and replied, "James, you're really confident, aren't you? I told you we've broken up. Do you really think I'm going to spend my entire life with you?" The restaurant was crowded, and James, no longer able to make a scene like he used to, lowered his voice. "Vivian," he said, his tone almost condescending. "If not me, then who? Who else would you be with?" A sudden wave of anger surged within me. Smiling, I deliberately hooked my freshly manicured nails into William's sleeve, lightly tracing circles on the back of his hand. William's grin deepened, full of amusement and provocation. James immediately stepped between us, cutting off the interaction. His expression grew tense as he called over the restaurant manager, bowing and scraping. The manager approached. James, pointing to William's simple, unassuming attire, declared, "This guy's just a broke student from our school. There's no way he can afford a fancy French meal. He's probably here to cause trouble." The manager, attempting to appear authoritative, adjusted his tie and glanced at me. James quickly added, "Don't worry, I know her. She's innocent. He's the one you should be looking into." William, unbothered by the commotion, strolled toward us, his posture relaxed and confident. James's smug smile widened, and he turned to me with a heartfelt gaze. "Vivian, you need to think carefully. Who's the right choice for you? I'm going to work as an executive at a top firm someday. If you come back to me now, we can be just like before. What do you say?" His shamelessness made me laugh. "Even if I end up begging for scraps on the streets, I wouldn't get back together with you," I replied curtly. James's face darkened with frustration. Gritting his teeth, he hissed, "Vivian, don't regret this." By then, the heavyset manager had stepped closer, but the moment he caught sight of William, his expression shifted dramatically. Suddenly, his attitude became even more deferential than it had been toward James. Bowing deeply, he stammered, "Young master, what brings you here?" Both James and I froze in shock. William, dressed in bargain bin clothes, turned out to be the true boss of this high-end restaurant. Unable to hold back his laughter anymore, William's sharp gaze fell on James. Who was it just now? Claiming I couldn't afford a French meal? He asked, his tone playful yet cutting. The manager, now fully realizing who William was, took a moment to steady himself before bowing even lower. Young Master William, I had no idea it was you. James's face went through a rapid series of changes. Confusion, disbelief, and finally panic. Stammering, he tried to salvage the situation. William, you joker. This restaurant belongs to the Lee family, not yours. Your last name is Williams, isn't it? William, calmly slicing his steak, replied with a smirk. Perhaps I never mentioned this before, but my mother's maiden name is Lee. The blood drained from James's face as the realization hit him. He glanced nervously between the groveling manager and my icy expression before forcing out a weak smile. The man who once shared my life, my so-called husband of many years, now stood there humiliated, bowing and scraping before William. Young master, I didn't know about your status before. Please, forgive me, James stammered, his voice trembling. William's eyes gleamed with mischief. The manager, eager to please, immediately chimed in. This is entirely my fault. How could we have hired someone like this? He turned to James, his tone harsh. You don't need to come back to work here anymore. I remember James once telling me how much he valued this job, how dignified it made him feel. He didn't want to lose it. But now, caught between his pride and the reality before him, he hesitated. After a brief moment, he grabbed my hand and tried to pull me away. Vivian, come with me. Let's go. He pleaded desperately. James yanked me hard, and the sound of broken porcelain echoed as the dishes on the table crashed to the ground. A wave of humiliation swept over me, igniting a fury I could no longer contain. I grabbed the vase from the round table and brought it down on his head with all my strength. The sound of the vase shattering reverberated through the restaurant, and the room fell silent. Broken rose petals and water dripped down James's stunned face. He stared at me in disbelief as I stood there, panting, a dark, defiant smile curling at the corner of my lips. You said I needed to know who the right choice was, didn't you? I said coldly, without hesitation. I grabbed William by the chin and kissed him, pressing my lips against his. For a brief, frozen moment, my mind went blank. Then, with William still in my arms, I turned to James and taunted him. William is my choice. He's the one I want to be with. Sorry, William, I whispered under my breath, the weight of regret hitting me as I realized I had just dragged him into this mess. My emotions had gotten the better of me, and I felt terrible for using him to make a point. But to my surprise, William's expression shifted. His usual confidence disappeared, and for a fleeting moment, his face took on a pitiful sadness, like an abandoned puppy. Vivian, you used me and then discarded me. What kind of heartless woman are you? He said, feigning heartbreak. But that was my first kiss. His words brought back the memory of our kiss, and my face immediately flushed red. I wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. Before I could collect myself, William leaned in, his voice teasing. You know, Vivian, you're going to have to take responsibility for me now. Later that night, the streets were quiet as William and I stood face to face under the streetlights. I didn't say a word, my mind swirling with doubt. A chilly breeze brushed past us, and William's usual smile faded slightly. William, I finally said, my voice trembling. I'm sorry. I don't want to date anyone. His eyes widened slightly, but I looked away, unable to meet his gaze. I've been through a failed marriage. I continued. I don't want to take that gamble again. Marriage is just the graveyard of love, and life is nothing but a series of petty struggles. I braced myself for his anger or disappointment, but instead, he stood there silently for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he shrugged and smiled faintly. That's fine. If you don't want to date, we won't date, he said casually. But, Vivian, you can't stop me from liking you, can you? His warm smile returned, and he added softly, I've already waited for you for years. I don't mind waiting a few more. I'm good at waiting. His words struck me deeply. For the first time in what felt like forever, someone wasn't telling me to endure, to settle, or to accept. Instead, he was showing me genuine respect. My heart, long dormant, gave a sudden, powerful thump. Tears welled up in my eyes, and my voice cracked. Thank you, William. Life slowly began to fall into place after that. In my previous life, I had wasted years on love, failed my graduate school exams twice, and eventually resigned myself to being a mediocre housewife. This time, I poured every ounce of energy into my studies, spending nearly 24 hours a day in the library. I hadn't seen James in a while, and the months passed quickly. With my hard work, my grades soared, placing me firmly in the top 5 of my department. Brimming with confidence, I submitted my application for a scholarship. But just as everything seemed to be going smoothly, my advisor called me into his office. Vivian, he said with a frown, someone has anonymously accused you of cheating. I froze in shock as he handed me a letter. The accusations were written in black and white, claiming I had leaked exam answers before the test and questioning my moral character, labeling me as fickle and promiscuous. My hands trembled as I clutched the letter. Decades of familiarity told me the handwriting wasn't James's. Suspicious, I went to the rooftop to confront Sarah. Was it you? I demanded. Sarah didn't even flinch. She crossed her arms and smirked. And if it was? Everything I wrote is true. You leaked exam answers. You abandoned James. And now you're stringing William along. You're a disgrace to women. Vivian. I shook with anger, my entire body trembling. The accusation about leaking answers is baseless. I shouted. William and I hadn't even held hands, let alone engaged in any sort of ambiguous relationship. Yet, Sarah shamelessly took out her phone, began recording, and narrated mockingly. Everyone, take a look. The Queen of Heartbreakers has finally shown her face. This woman dares to apply for a scholarship? What a joke. As the righteous defender of morality, I've already reported her to the academic office. Let's see how she deals with her karma. Her name is Vivian White. It hit me suddenly. While I had been burying myself in books for the past 6 months, Sarah had been relentlessly spreading rumors about a heartbreaker who abandoned her boyfriend and toyed with others. That heartbreaker was me. Once Sarah revealed my name, a wave of internet trolls began to dig into my personal life. They doxed my family's address and bombarded my parents with harassing phone calls. William sent me a photo of my family's front door, splattered with paint and covered in hateful graffiti. Phrases like, "Your family is a disgrace," and "all of you should burn in hell" were scrawled all over it. Vivian, I passed by your house just now. William texted. What's going on? Are you okay? Before I could reply, my father messaged me. Vivian, your mother's in the hospital. She's overwhelmed with stress. We've been getting hundreds of harassing calls for 3 days straight. Looking at Sarah's smug face, I felt a mixture of anger and despair. She laughed hysterically, her voice cutting through the wind. Vivian, your karma has finally caught up to you. The gusts of wind blew her hair around her face as her laughter turned bitter. Her eyes filled with hatred as she hissed. Do you know how much I've hated you since high school? You always had that innocent, pure look that drew every guy's attention. Do you know what James meant to me? I gave him everything. And he still told me that the love of his life was you. He even had the audacity to claim that the two of you had been married in another lifetime. I stared at her, watching as her hatred spiraled into madness. Strangely, I couldn't bring myself to feel anger anymore. Instead, I felt pity. Her jealousy and bitterness had consumed her, twisting the confident and radiant woman she once was into something unrecognizable. Sarah stood at the edge of the rooftop, her voice faltering as tears streaked down her face. Vivian, she said, her tone breaking. Do you know what I envy most about you? I took a step forward, sensing something was wrong. Sarah, I said gently, trying to calm her down. Don't do anything rash. We can work this out. By now, a crowd had gathered below. Among them were James, nervously lurking at the edge, William, who was panting from running to get there, and my parents. My mother, frail in her hospital gown, leaned heavily on my father, her eyes never leaving me. Sarah's mental state seemed to be crumbling. Her smile was fractured, her expression teetering on the edge of despair. Vivian, she whispered, her voice trembling. You're so naive. Do you know what I've always envied most about you? I steadied my breathing, trying to keep my voice calm. Sarah, think carefully. Once you're gone, there's nothing left. Nothing can be undone. She gave me a mocking look but didn't respond. Instead, her hand moved slowly to her flat stomach. Shaking her head, she said, I already have nothing, and I don't want to leave anything behind. With those words, she stepped off the edge. Her red silhouette plunged through the air, and a sickening sound echoed in the distance, like the splatter of a watermelon hitting the ground. I froze, my body stiff and unmoving. Her final words echoed in my ears. Vivian, you were right. He wasn't a man worth trusting. Numbly, I descended the stairs, my mind blank. The people who loved me surrounded me, their presence warm and protective. William took it upon himself to release a video clarifying the situation, finally putting an end to the online harassment. James, flustered and pale, approached me awkwardly. Vivian, I'm just glad you're okay. I never thought that crazy woman would go this far. If I'd known, I would have stayed away from her. His words only deepened the hollow feeling inside me. My eyes turned red with rage as I lunged forward and slapped James hard across the face. The sound echoed loudly, leaving James momentarily stunned. He instinctively raised his hand to retaliate, but before he could, William stepped in, his voice dripping with mockery. Vivian, why are you resorting to violence? Let me help break this up. With a sarcastic smirk, William pinned James's arm down with a grip so firm it left James helpless. In the ensuing chaos, I managed to land several more blows on James, leaving his once handsome face swollen and bruised. He flailed and cried out. I didn't know she would kill herself. Who could have guessed someone so clever would do something so stupid? I just slept with her a few times, and then she started clinging to me. Fueled by fury, I punched him again, his face now resembling a mess of bruises and swelling. It wasn't until the police stepped in and pulled me away that I managed to calm down. Still sprawled on the ground, James kept making excuses, muttering about how Sarah came from a broken family, and tried to make him take responsibility for her problems. You can't seriously expect me to commit to some clingy, crazy woman. He spat bitterly. You're an absolute scumbag, James, I said coldly. Before I could say more, William landed a punch square on James's nose, silencing him instantly. Unlike my hits, William's blow carried undeniable force, leaving James dazed and speechless. As the chaos died down, I followed William, intending to leave the scene, but James's mocking voice rang out behind us. Vivian, are you really this stupid? Don't you realize the William standing beside you isn't who you think he is? Can't you see he's not the same? William, usually confident and composed, suddenly froze. His posture stiffened, and his expression grew unnatural. I turned to see James laughing so hard he could barely catch his breath. His words came out between fits of laughter. William. Oh, William. So, you're one of us too? How did it feel watching Vivian and me together in our past life? Did it sting? You waited decades for her, didn't you? And she didn't even know. His words hit me like a thunderclap. I stood motionless, my mind racing. Memories of what William had once said came flooding back. I've waited for you for so many years. I don't mind waiting longer. I'm good at waiting. Tears welled up in my eyes as I connected the dots. The white rose left at my bedside when I died in my past life, the one that had brought me comfort in my final moments, was the same as the one William had given me in this life. Seeing me cry, James smirked and continued. Oh, come on, Vivian. Do you really think you and William can make it work? You failed once in marriage. Do you really want to waste your life again? His smugness made it clear. James had always known I was unhappy in our marriage. He simply didn't care because he benefited from my misery. Standing on his self-righteous pedestal, he sneered. Vivian, you're heartless. We had children together. For God's sake, children are the product of love and happiness. I looked at him, my voice calm and detached. If children are only for the sake of reproduction, then I see no reason for them to exist. After 2 lifetimes, I'd grown indifferent to the idea of destiny or ties bound by children. If James and I didn't end up together in this life, it simply proved we weren't meant to be. James opened his mouth to retort, but his face betrayed a hint of unease. It was as if Sarah's death had no effect on him at all. Just then, The police arrived with a forensic specialist. They immediately restrained James and forced him to the ground. "Don't you dare pin this on me," James shouted, his voice high-pitched and panicked. "Sarah's death has nothing to do with me. She killed herself." The forensic specialist spoke coldly. "Mr. Carter, our initial examination revealed that Miss Sarah was 3 months pregnant at the time of her death. A DNA test confirmed that you're the father." James began sweating profusely, but he still tried to argue. "So what if the kid was mine? I didn't kill her." One of the officers pulled out Sarah's shattered phone. Screen flickering. The officer displayed fragments of a conversation on the screen. Sarah had told James about her pregnancy and begged him to take responsibility. His response: "Get lost. You're too clingy. There's no way I'd ever stay with someone like you." The final message on the screen read, "If you really love me, you'll go die for me." The officer's tone turned icy. "Mr. Carter, this evidence suggests that you encouraged Miss Sarah's suicide. You're under arrest. Save your excuses for the courtroom." James's eyes widened in shock, his bruised and swollen face looking utterly ridiculous. Desperation filled his voice as he turned to me, shouting, "Vivian, help me. You know the truth. You know Sarah was the one who wouldn't leave me alone. You were my wife. You can testify for me." I glanced at the comments under William's recently posted video, filled with condemnation for James. A sense of relief washed over me. Feigning innocence, I shrank behind William and said to the officers, "I'm sorry, officers, but I have no idea what Mr. Carter is talking about. I'm not even old enough to legally marry," I said with a teasing smile. "And this man next to me? He's my real boyfriend. Some people should just keep their distance." James's expression twisted in a mix of shock and rage, his face a whirlwind of emotions. He opened his mouth to retort, but William cut him off smoothly, his voice dripping with mock concern. "It seems Mr. Carter isn't in the best mental state. Perhaps he should be sent to a psychiatric hospital. The Way family will cover the costs." James stood frozen for a moment, unable to process the insult. Before the police dragged him away without mercy, he screamed curses at the heavens, at the earth, at everyone. But it was all futile. I turned and grabbed William's hand, a carefree grin on my face. "Come on. Let's go. My parents are waiting for us to have dinner." William stood rooted to the spot, staring at me like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. I tugged his hand playfully and teased, "What's wrong? Doesn't my real boyfriend want to take responsibility for me?" Flustered, William shook his head furiously and tightened his grip on my hand. A wave of warmth spread through me, a sense of security I hadn't felt in years. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the quiet path, William and I walked side by side. Our footsteps matched in rhythm, and for the first time in a long time, my heart felt light. "My roommate told me earlier," I said, breaking the silence, "that my scholarship application was approved." William stiffened slightly, his nerves betraying him. I suddenly remembered something and turned to him, narrowing my eyes. "Why did you pretend to be poor when you're clearly rich?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. "My parents wanted me to experience life without relying on my family's wealth, so I kept my identity a secret." "And why keep up the act for so long?" I pressed, my curiosity getting the better of me. William looked genuinely wronged as he gazed at me with puppy-like eyes. "Because you said rich men always turn bad. I didn't want you to think I was like that." I couldn't help but laugh, squeezing his hand tightly. "William, this time, I won't make you wait any longer." Epilogue. My name is Ryan Way, the adopted son of William. It was my father who brought me out of the orphanage, saving my life. For all the years we lived abroad, I never once saw him with a woman. He would always smile gently while watching me play, and in his quiet moments, he would carefully tend to a bouquet of white roses. Once, I asked him why he always kept those roses. He merely smiled and said nothing. He would sit in his rocking chair, slowly rocking back and forth, as if waiting for something, or someone. When his time came, he clung to life just long enough to tell me to deliver a bouquet of white roses to someone. Following his wishes, I traveled across the country to place the flowers by the bedside of an elderly woman in a hospital. Then I returned home, exhausted but relieved to have fulfilled his final request. When I told him the task was complete, he smiled weakly and murmured, "Good, good." His voice trailed off as he whispered, "Vivian." On his bedside table was a high school graduation photo, with everyone but one man and one woman scratched out. My heart ached as I knelt by his bed, crying uncontrollably. His passing left me in deep sorrow. I became distracted, unable to focus, and one day I got into a terrible car accident. A truck crushed my car, and I died instantly. But in death, I found myself opening my eyes again, blurry and unfamiliar. I saw a couple standing over me, a man and a woman. It was the day I had been abandoned at the orphanage, but this time, they had come for me. The man seemed vaguely familiar. He smiled warmly at the woman and said, "What do you think? Should we adopt this one?" To my shock, it was my father, his younger self, full of life. I reached out to him, but all that came out was an infant's garbled coos. From their conversation, I learned that the woman, his wife, didn't want to have children of her own. Respecting her wishes, they decided to adopt. That's how they found me. The woman, beautiful and kind, looked exactly like the person in the photo my father kept by his bed. She smiled as she picked me up. "What should we name him?" she asked. William's younger self thought for a moment, then casually said, "Let's call him Ryan." "Perfect," she agreed with a laugh. As an infant, I could only blow bubbles in protest. Through the car's reflection, I thought I saw William wink at me. My tiny heart filled with confusion, but I soon dismissed it. After all, I was just a baby. And babies? Babies just need to act like babies. My stomach rumbled, and I did the only thing I could. Waoeoe.